5th of May 2019 is a date which will remain firmly etched on the minds of Essex Police in Basildon.
I don't think it's something you can ever put behind you. It's something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, and I'm sure it's the same for my colleagues.
Nothing could have prepared me mentally for what happened on the 5th of May.
I'd never been involved in an incident so big as this.
I still find it unbelievable that somebody did that to us.
Canvey Island, Essex. A convoy of cars and motorbikes have gathered at an industrial estate in memory of the death of a friend. Police are monitoring the event closely.
By about 10:10, we started to get reports of individuals driving dangerously on the pavements and through the car parks, pulling wheelies, doing donuts on motorcycles, which is extremely dangerous. As the commander, I just kept watchful eye. I had a helicopter above as well. This was quite a large gathering of people, and we didn't quite know how things were going to pan out. We wanted to have good visual control.
The police notice that one person is riding a bike dangerously.
This individual stuck out in the crowd. There weren't many people actively goading the police, but his behaviour on the bike had not only been reckless enough to draw our attention, but it continued to be reckless and deliberately antagonistic. And he sped off up the road, up the wrong way, and made a break for it. And that's what started the police response in seeking to apprehend this guy. My priority at all points was to minimise risks to the public.
Once you've got the helicopter up, we've got a massive advantage over them. So it was just a case of we were just watching it and monitoring it, waiting to see what would happen and hoping it would come to a safe conclusion. But then obviously the longer and longer it went on, we kind of realised, oh, this isn't going to end quickly.
There's nothing good about driving through an underpass at speed where vehicles don't go, it's only pedestrians. We followed him. He knew the helicopter was above him. You don't get away from the police that easy.
After an 8-mile pursuit, the police have him cornered.
And this time the plan was very clear. He doesn't leave this location other than a police van.
But now a crowd of 20 to 30 people have gathered around the rider.
The crowd were very hostile towards the police. You could hear them sort of like blocking him off, not wanting the moped rider to be arrested, as you can expect.
Chief Inspector Baldwin decides to move in slowly and arrest the offender.
It was just a case of making sure he had nowhere to hide. He was in the open, and I had enough officers to put a ring of steel around him and then move in.
The moped rider then revs the bike and throws it to the ground.
At that point, it went pretty much as good as can be. The chap on the bike kind of gave up almost immediately.
And then myself and other officers all moved in just to sort of try and give everyone the breathing space to work and make sure nothing escalated further.
And it was at that point that we started to have to manage the unexpected. You don't expect a woman in her 40s to emerge wielding a hammer above her head, screaming at officers and running around threatening officers, holding the hammer in her hand. Thankfully, 2 officers had spotted her, managed to get into a blind spot behind her, and as she went to lift the hammer, they snatched it out the back of her hand and disarmed her, and at that point, 3 officers detained her.
Meanwhile, other officers rush in to help arrest the moped driver.
Right, you're under arrest on suspicion of theft of motor vehicle. You're not saying anything, but now it's do not mention my question. So fly right court. Do you want cuffs? Do you want cuffs?
With the hammer-wielding woman and moped rider apprehended,
2 in custody.
officers still need to control the increasingly agitated crowd.
They were all shouting and swearing at us, telling us that what we were doing was wrong and that we didn't need to be doing it and all this kind of stuff. And we get that every day. We're used to people shouting and swearing and telling us that we're idiots. And then out the corner of my eye, I saw a gentleman appear from down one of the alleyways who was just sprinting at full speed towards where we were obviously trying to protect. So I ran across towards him to kind of intercept him and stop him going through. That kind of ended up in me and him colliding.
And the two of them ended up on the ground with the officer underneath.
I was pretty much at the bottom of the pile. You've got officers trying to get him off of me. He had his arms wrapped around my legs trying to just keep hold of me.
And then everything did go crazy.
Later, things spiral as another man joins the attack, using petrol as a weapon.
Going through my head was just panic.
Get him away!
I was hearing them shout, "Light them up."
In Essex, police have chased a dangerous driver on a moped into a local estate.
Right, you're under arrest on suspicion of theft of motor vehicle.
They've arrested 2 people and are struggling with a third when things take an even darker turn.
It was while we were trying to get control of this gentleman who had run out of the middle of nowhere that this other chap has appeared with the watering can.
A man carrying a large watering can sprints over and throws the liquid over the faces of nearby officers. PC Cuts steps in to fend off the attacker.
I didn't know what was in the watering can. It could have been anything. Initially, my first thoughts were it was probably acid. But sort of as I got nearer, I could smell like this petrol. So I've sort of fumbled around to get my baton out, but once I've eventually got it, so I've put it behind my head and then just struck him like in line with our training. So it's not just a random act of sort of violence, it's a controlled measure that we're taught to use to sort of get people away from us and create a safe distance.
It wasn't until the smell kind of hit us that everyone realised what that actually was.
Initially, it just felt like stinging. You could feel like tingling sort of all down my front where the petrol had gone.
And then obviously you've got people shouting petrol, petrol, because obviously we had officers with taser there. There's obviously the consideration for the tasers could spark and ignite the petrol. The 8 of us were now covered in petrol.
You all right?
We still had this chap on the floor that we needed to restrain. We still had a crowd that needed to be kind of controlled. And obviously we still had the chap who had just poured petrol on us. We didn't know where he was or if he was now going to try and set us on fire.
One match, one lighter, one spark could result in us going up in flames and being disfigured for life or possibly even dead.
We could hear the crowd saying all sorts of things, like saying who's got matches, who's got a lighter, set them on fire.
Going through my head was just panic because there were people smoking around us, taser officers behind us.
I was hearing them shout, "Light them up." I don't know how we didn't just cut and run. But then that's not the way we're wired. We all stuck together. And there's something running in the core of us that says you don't run away from the danger, you run towards it.
Trojans 8, we need an ambulance here for the officers that have had petrol thrown in their face.
The team need backup urgently. An officer presses their emergency button.
When that red button gets pressed, anybody and everybody on any channel, any serving police officer on duty at that time gets a notification that there's an officer in trouble. Well, there were quite a few of us in trouble at that point.
Detective Constable Natalie Backhouse is in her office when she gets the call.
I heard the emergency assistance call being put up And I can't recall his exact words, but it was something similar to, just get everybody here. And hearing those words, my heart just sank.
We needed the team around us to make decisions for us at that point, because we'd been taken to a place where we'd never had that done to us before.
Everybody in the office just bundled into the car. We drove there quick as we could.
There was noise, there was activity, there was banging, crashing. We were on the top of a car, people were on the ground, people were in pain. There was a cacophony of sound which was just very immediate, with the constant sound of the helicopter overhead.
Backup officers arrive at the scene.
It's something that no one's ever, well, no, I'd certainly never experienced before or heard of before, but everybody kind of just knew what to do straight away. Obviously, the guys who had been covered in it the worst, who got it in their eyes and their mouths, who had fallen to the ground, officers straight away went over to them, helped them up and just took them out of the situation and started giving them first aid.
Get him away!
We were helping some across who'd got it all in their eyes, who sounded like they just couldn't see anything. And their faces were red, their eyes were just stinging.
We had members of the public coming out, offering saucepans and kettles full of water, helping them rinse their faces off and stuff like that.
I immediately started washing off my arms, which were burning at that point. My head was burning and down the back of my shirt. So at that point, I basically just got a bucket of water poured over my head to try and to wash off the worst of it.
When we got there, there was officers everywhere, emergency services staff everywhere.
Fire crew turned up and they obviously washed us down with their hoses and stuff after the members of the public had kind of given us initial first aid. The ambulance crews turned up and checked us over. But all the while all that was going on, you've still got the crowd there who are still obviously causing issues.
At any point, it felt like it could flare up all over again. Something could just set it off again.
Later, as more backup officers arrive, the situation is brought under control.
It was very reassuring to see about 90-odd officers turn up to help us.
In Essex, police officers have been attacked and doused in petrol.
I remember thinking, what the heck's going on? What am I meant to do now?
Backup has arrived to scenes of chaos.
There was quite a large crowd, even still at that point after the incident had happened, where members of the public were being vocally abusive towards officers.
It was an awful situation to be in, but you just got to put on a brave face and stay calm.
There were quite a few police cars now with officers they were just constantly turning up with blue lights.
The situation is finally resolved and several people are arrested. 2 officers are taken to hospital and the rest of the team return to the police station to give their statements.
That was an eye-opening experience. I mean, it's not normal for police officers to take statements from police officers. And to be, I suppose, invited into the mindset of those victims at that time, it was chilling. And I found myself close to tears on several occasions writing those statements. That was an experience that I won't forget.
A team of detectives, including Natalie, immediately set to work building a case.
Watching this footage, it was scary because I knew the people on there. And I saw the person that had done it, and I could see that that person was fully intending to attack these officers with that petrol.
On that day, we had to learn what it was to be a victim. And that experience has made us all the stronger when it now comes to identifying with other victims.
Chief Constable B.J. Harrington is all too aware of the effects incidents like these can have on the officers involved.
I suppose it worries officers and staff. They understand that they know they are vulnerable. They go to dangerous places. They meet sometimes violent, confused, disturbed, aggressive people who are often in distress. So I think sometimes it can reinforce that feeling of anxiety and fear. Equally, you'll see with these officers, it builds a spirit of camaraderie as well, because they do look after each other.
Five months after the incident, the case was in court.
Coming into court is always a daunting experience, even for detectives and officers that come all the time. Throughout the trial of the co-defendant, it was quite daunting because we didn't know what the verdict was going to be.
The driver of the moped was convicted of driving a motor vehicle dangerously. He was disqualified from driving for 12 months and was also fined. The individual who waved the hammer was convicted of possession of an offensive weapon. She received 9 months in prison, suspended for 18. The man who threw the petrol was convicted of 8 counts of administering a noxious substance with intent to cause injury. He was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison.
The judge awarded the maximum sentence that she could for the offence that was charged and for which he was found guilty. And I think that speaks a testament to the court supporting us.
This courthouse is basically the place where justice was sentenced.
If it ever crosses anybody's mind to throw petrol over police officers or emergency workers in the future, all I can say is pack your toothbrush when you go to court, because you'll be going to prison. My advice to you is don't do it.
It is good that we can just show that, yes, we understand what's happened here, but it hasn't changed us.
Today, 3 of the officers are returning to the scene together, getting some closure on the events of that day.
This will be the first time I've gone back to the actual scene of the incident since the day back on the 5th of May.
I went back once, but yeah, it's a strange experience going back. It made me feel like just weird inside.
It's pretty much impossible to drive past it or go past it without thinking back to that day and remembering what happened. You get flashbacks and just remember the things that people were saying and what could have quite easily have happened.
This bit here was the swan song, if you like. This was where he just wanted to stick it back to the police and goad us into engaging with him. At that point, I certainly thought we could all go up like Roman candles here.
It's nice to be here with my colleagues, to get it spoken through of everyone's perspective, how it affected them, what happened.
Being back here with Matt and Andy has helped me come to terms with what went on here. We've all had to process what happened in different ways.
These guys know exactly what it was like because they were there. They were going through the same feelings, the same emotions. They went through the same build-up that led to the incident, and they saw how it came out of nowhere. So coming back here with them, talking through it, we all just know exactly what we're referring to, and it's a lot easier to discuss.
It's that understanding, that camaraderie, that commitment to what we do every day that actually resulted in the police chalking this one up as a success. We did manage to achieve our core objectives on that day. We kept people safe, we put away the bad guys, and we made sure that the community returned to normal and nobody else had any lasting effects.
A week later, the team find themselves back at the Crown Court in Basildon. But this time, it's for something very different. They've just received a commendation from the judge for their bravery on the day of the incident.
It's a bit overwhelming, really. Obviously makes you feel very valued with what we do, and it's a real high point to be commended for doing our job. It feels really great.
It makes you proud for the job that you do, and obviously that you are getting recognised for what you're doing. It kind of makes it feel all worth it.
It's a great honour to receive this commendation. It's normally only given to investigative officers, so for an operational police officer to get one, it's a massive deal.
There were other people who helped bring the offenders to justice, and all of our colleagues who turned up in support of us. You know, they deserve a part of this commendation too.
I'm feeling massively proud of my colleagues working at my work and just the whole of Essex Police.
In 2017, Merseyside Police dealt with a terrifying incident.
And he's just pulled out the biggest silver handheld gun I've ever seen. He pointed it at you? Yeah.
The tin does contain explosives, which could potentially cause very serious injury.
That was probably the gulp moment for me.
PC Stuart Bratherton and Mark Patterson were on duty that day. They're part of the close-knit team stationed at Wallasey Police Station.
On the intel briefing, we've got a number of named nominals who have been identified by intel as being involved in knife crime on the Wirral.
This section, D block on Wirral, we're a proper bunch of brothers and sisters. We look out for each other.
Catching criminals has always been the best part of us.
Wear the black leather jacket and blue jeans, does appear aggressive.
We both joined together back in early 1999, and we've been quite fortunate that we've both worked with each other for pretty much all of our career.
We've both been stationed on response, on the Wirral, pretty much the whole of that time.
Two very likeable characters. They're very old-fashioned in their policing style. They work very, very well together, and their local knowledge is extremely good.
We're like a bit like husband and wife in work, really. You can't not kind of become big parts of each other's lives. Relationships, marriages, divorces, kids. I think with working with Stu and knowing Stu for the best part of 21 years, we know exactly how the other works and responds and the way we each do things. So you don't necessarily have to have that communication or conversation when you're dealing with an incident. It just flows.
And these close bonds would prove crucial when Mark and Stuart had to deal with a very serious incident.
We'd left the station on the day just to go out generally patrolling. So we were making towards that side of the Wirral anyway when the job came out.
Not far from where the incident initially unfolded.
A member of the public has called to say they've seen an armed male.
He just pulled out the biggest silver handheld gun I've ever seen, and he pointed it directly at me.
Listen, the gun you saw, what type of gun was it? What colour was it?
Silver.
Silver. Did it have a long handle, short handle?
He got out of his car with it in his hand, raised it up, pointed it in through my windscreen.
He pointed it at you?
Yeah.
The calls came in reporting a man with a gun threatening another man. Possession of what was described as a silver handgun or pistol.
All right, can you just say no, we're on our way? All right, love. We're just on the phone to the informant now. He can still see the male with this firearm.
We were around about here, weren't we, I think?
Yeah.
Close by. So where the actual incident took place on the promenade in West Kirby is a mile and a half away. We'd have activated the blue lights and the klaxons and made there on an emergency. We need to get there as quickly as possible.
Mark and Stuart know they'll need backup from a firearms unit.
There's non-armed officers. Stu and I were dispatched to the area, but to go to an RVP, a rendezvous point, to basically sit off at a distance from where the incidents occurred, but ready for further instructions and await the arrival of the firearms officers.
An RV point? Junction of Grange Road, please.
Just on the left down here, wasn't it?
We're aware that armed response were en route, but they were
about 8 or 9 minutes away.
Our instruction is to just stand by for further update whilst we're awaiting firearms to attend. And then there was information about the registration, make, model, colour.
The call came in saying it was like a Ford Focus in black with a silver pistol on board.
We're looking a bit more enthusiastically for it now. And because of the position we're in, I turn and I'm looking back up the hill because you can't see everything in the mirrors. And as I look up the hill, I see coming around the bend at the top of the hill, a car, same colour, same make, same model. And then as it gets a bit closer, it's the same reg as well. And I say to Stu straight away, Stu, it's here, mate, we've got it, it's behind us now.
Yeah, there's a patrol in Norman's Green, it's just driven right past.
With the firearms team still en route, Mark and Stuart must decide the best course of action.
I shouted up on the radio straight away to say, I've now got eyes on this car. What's the ETA for firearms? And I think at this point, they were still a good 7 or 8 minutes out coming from the city. So it's decision time at that point. What are you going to do? The concern from a police officer's point of view is, why has he got a gun? Is it a real gun? What's his intention? And where's he going now? And what's he going to do?
We decided, as our response was so far away, that we would follow the vehicle. We've moved out, it's turned right into Darman's Green, so we've initially followed it at a distance.
We didn't have any blue lights or sirens on. We were a good distance back initially.
Room supervision, just confirm direction of travel for the target vehicle, please. Lee Road.
And literally, as we were at this point here, we seen the vehicle turn right into this road here.
At which point, we both instantly have this sinking feeling when we realise you can see the end of the road, it doesn't go anywhere.
A dead end poses serious danger. Exposed and alone, Mark and Stuart were now in the gunman's line of fire. Later, Mark and Stuart have to think fast.
We couldn't just sit here in the car. Just sat here doing nothing could potentially be the more dangerous thing to do.
And they make another shocking discovery.
The tin does contain explosives, which could potentially cause very serious injury.
In the Wirral, 2 unarmed police officers have followed a man they suspect is armed with a gun into a cul-de-sac.
At which point, we both instantly have this sinking feeling when we realise you can see the end of the road, it doesn't go anywhere.
Mark and Stuart know they're in danger. The driver is alerted to their presence, and with backup still to arrive, they must handle the situation alone. Firearms officers are still en route, but Mark and Stuart know they need to take action.
Stand your position now, mate. Observe only if the vehicle approaches you, withdraw.
We pulled up behind the vehicle, we activated our blue lights.
We didn't know. Is it loaded? Is it in his hand? What's his state of mind? What's he going to do next? We couldn't just sit here in the car. Just sat here doing nothing could potentially be the more dangerous thing to do.
The driver has started to get out of the vehicle.
We have had no choice but to intercept.
Mark has stopped him, detained him, informed him of the reason why we've stopped him, thinking that he's got a firearm in the vehicle. And at this point, he's tried to get back into the vehicle to grab something. He was acting strangely. We weren't too sure, what his actions or intentions were.
He tried to reach into the car for something or get back into the car, so we had to restrain him, handcuff him. Got him secured in our police car, and things kind of snowballed quite a bit from there.
With the offender in cuffs, Mark searches his car.
Mark has recovered a silver firearm from the back seat of the vehicle. So I've returned to the police vehicle and I've cautioned him on suspicion of possession of a firearm.
I started to have another look to make sure there was nothing else there that we needed to secure.
Mark was about to make another shocking discovery.
And on looking in the door pocket right next to him, driver's seat, found a metal device. Looked like a metal tin. It was very heavy.
And there was like a piece of material coming out the side which appeared what we thought to be a fuse.
Mark has found what appears to be a dangerous-looking homemade explosive.
We've gone and actually spoke to him
Asked him what it was, and his first reply to us was that it was a firework.
The tin does contain explosives, and it is fitted with a fuse, so it's potential to cause a lot of injury.
We're going to have to set up a cordon and could deploy some further patrols down, please.
With no idea how dangerous the device is, Mark and Stuart need to act fast.
We removed the guy that we'd arrested to custody, so we actually left the scene at that point, but things continue to evolve.
We're now en route to custody with this male being arrested for possession of a firearm. He's also been further arrested for suspicion of possession of an IED under Section 4 of the Explosive Substances Act.
En route to the police station, the offender makes a frightening revelation.
Male has confirmed the tin does contain explosives. He's also put inside the tin shrapnel. There are multiple metal fragments used. Could potentially cause very serious injury.
It was confirmed that he'd filled it with shrapnel, so it was particularly dangerous.
The street is quickly evacuated and the army are called in.
MOD ordnance were requested. Either the Army or the Air Force have their own bomb experts who we deploy, so we don't have any in-house who can deal with such devices. So we deploy the MOD and they come out and they literally take over. They couldn't even deal with the devices themselves hands-on. They had to deploy a remote control robot, and the device and the car was detonated in order to make it safe. That was probably the gulp moment for me. If MOD ordnance are on scene and they're not going to touch it, and these guys have got big kahunas and they're going to use a remote robot to do it, gulp.
He just, made this device himself. It was homemade. It was full of shrapnel, sorts of metal pins and nails. It was quite a crude device, and if it had have gone off, it would have caused a lot of injury.
I think it's only after the event, when you sit down and everything's done and you've done your bit and you start to decompress, that you think about the consequences and what could have happened and how dangerous it really was.
The male was convicted of the making of and possession of an explosive substance for unlawful purposes and possession of a firearm with intent to cause fear of violence. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison.
I think when you know that you've done the job, no one's got hurt, guns are recovered, explosives are recovered, a guy's in a cell, you go home and think, yeah, did my job today.
And Mark and Stuart continue to do their job.
Ambulance have been on requesting our assistance.
Determined that their close brush with danger won't stop them from protecting and serving the public.
Hello, that's the police.
Shall we to brace it?
And a few months after the incident, they were rewarded for their courage.
Quite a shock, really. We received a phone call earlier on this year, and basically we were told by our federation that we'd been nominated by them and our chief constable for the National Bravery Awards.
They took very quick and decisive action. They were exceptionally brave in what they did. A very worthwhile award that they've received. As a supervisor, I'm very proud of what they did.
We went to Downing Street, we met the PM, met the Home Sec. It was a big deal and it was good, and we loved every minute of it.
Attacks and assaults on officers aren't issues exclusive to the UK. Sadly, they're commonplace for our closest neighbour as well. Brendan Doyle has always been passionate about joining the Irish Police, known as the Guards.
I always had an affinity for wanting to join the emergency services, especially the police. I went through college and I remember sitting in a lecture one day and I smiled at myself because I knew that this is my career, my life sorted at such a young age. I was like 20 at the time, 21. I was just delighted to know that I was in the career which meant everything to me. It was all massively rewarding. Even on a one-to-one basis, I could still be that person who helped someone in need.
Brendan was stationed in inner city Dublin and was on night duty when he was called to attend a domestic disturbance.
These are very, very common, but they're the most volatile type of call that any police officer will ever deal with. It's an emotional situation, and coming in, you know, wearing your uniform, it's a very, very kind of scary situation for all bodies involved. En route, we were, you know, making our inquiries to make sure we knew what we were going into. You know, was there any priors in the house? Was there any weapons? And there was nothing there, so this was a standard call for all intents and purposes. I knew I was dealing with a suspect who had already beaten up his mum. She called because she was in fear of her own life. When we arrived, I saw the front door swing open, and this was even before I got out of the car. So he knew we were called, and he knew we were coming.
When Brendan and his colleague entered the house, they could see the suspect had a weapon.
He raised the weapon above his head. There was a woman screaming at us in the house for help. I took out my own baton to protect myself. That's when he ran into the kitchen. Going into the kitchen is like dousing this whole situation in lighter fluid. It's an arsenal, because everything becomes a weapon. Knives, forks, boiling kettles, anything that's on the stove. It all can be used against us. But unfortunately, you know, he made the kitchen. As I approached the kitchen door, it was half wood, half glass, so I could see into the kitchen. Out of nowhere, he just peered out from behind a wall and holding a chef's knife, and he pointed that knife right at me. He went to stab me and then pushed me through, so he actually put me through the pane of glass. I didn't feel anything, which was kind of crazy. It wasn't until I looked down and I noticed that my hand was just dripping with blood, and I've never bled so hard in my life. And at that stage, my backup had arrived, and it actually took 2 riot shields from the public order unit to subdue the suspect. I walked out to the front of the house and I slumped down on the ground, and I just tried to stop the bleeding. It just wouldn't stop. One of my fellow members put me in the back of a patrol car, and he brought me to the hospital. I was in the hospital for a few hours, and I had to get some nerves removed and some work just to stop the bleeding. And I didn't get home till about maybe 4 o'clock that morning. And I slept like a baby that night, and I didn't know, but that was the last night of good sleep I would have for about 5 years.
Although Brendan had sustained some physical injuries to his hand, they weren't as significant as the sleepless nights he was about to endure because of the incident.
We've all had bad dreams, but a night terror is, you know, it's real. You think it's happening. So I was asleep, and in that dream, the suspect was stood over my bed with the knife, and I could actually feel my bed wet with my own blood. This would happen every night, and I would go to bed kind of growing more nervous about what's about to happen in sleep. And eventually, you know, I stopped going to sleep. It was so intense. My house felt like a prison. These feelings of frustration and anger seeped away into my daily life. I was afraid of the dreams. I was afraid of just constantly living on that day. I didn't want to live in that day anymore. I didn't want to recall it every night. No one wants to do that.
Eventually, Brendan stopped going to bed at all.
I would get in the car and I would drive. It would fill the hours. It would feel like I'm doing something instead of just looking at the ceiling or looking at the walls or looking at the clock. Eventually, it got to the stage where I would do a 6 or 7 hour drive, and I would be returning home when it's bright out. I would literally do laps of Dublin, and on my own, I would drive from Dublin to Cork, which would be around 6 hours return.
Brendan then asked his close friend Donal to join him on these long drives.
It started, he was driving on his own, and then he started to text me and ask, for a company, and I didn't realise just how long we were going to be driving for. He seemed in relatively high spirits, all things considered at the start. He seemed to be coping reasonably well. But over time, you could see that things were starting to change a little bit. You could end up driving for up to 5 hours or more. And you could end up anywhere. Most of the time, the conversation was fairly casual. Most of the time, it was normal chit-chat between the two of us. But there were times when the conversation turned dark.
We used to joke saying that it's like our psychiatry session. Looking back, like, it was probably the only kind of positive reward I had in that whole period. Everything else was negative. Donald being there offered me strength when I had none.
I never really thought of the role that I was playing as being all that particularly important. I was a friend who was around when I was needed.
Later, Brendan discovers that when you hit rock bottom, the only way is up.
There's a lot of things that I need to deal with in high-performance sport, and I definitely fall back on things I've learned from the darkness. So, in a way, it's a silver lining, and I'm grateful for what happened.
In Dublin, police officer Brendan Doyle was viciously attacked while attending a domestic dispute.
He went to stab me and then pushed me through the pane of glass.
It resulted in nightmares, and driving through the night with his friend Donal was the only way he could deal with his chronic insomnia. But the lack of sleep was beginning to have a profound effect on Brendan's life.
It was so consuming that, depression started setting in. It was a slow burner, and these things just started to develop on top of things, so it just kind of manifested. Everything was falling apart. I lost everything that made me who I was.
As well as depression, Brendan started to suffer from panic attacks.
My vest felt like a ton weight. My collar was tightening around my neck. My seatbelt was locking me into my chair. I was completely taken for surprise. I told my sergeant about this, and he suggested I take some time off, that there's something still going on. You need to take some time off to debrief.
After trying everything from counselling to sleeping pills to antidepressants, nothing worked.
I remember just waking up one day and decided that the only answer was to try to take my own life. You're so convinced that this is the only answer and there is no hope. I genuinely felt hopeless.
Thankfully, Brendan turned to the one person who'd already been down some long roads with him. And their conversation would spark the start of his recovery.
It was what I needed. I wouldn't have got through.
I was just trying to get you through to the next day.
Yeah. But that was like, you were doing it every day, though, that's the thing.
Years.
Yeah, exactly.
For years.
I don't think anyone else would do that.
Brendan asked me what I thought he should be doing to get his head right. And I suggested sport.
He suggested I get back doing what I loved and try to get back on my feet. And he said, this has gone beyond ignoring it. And the only thing I knew that worked for me was exercise and sport. So I returned to that and tried to get back on my feet that way. That was the turning point for me.
It was, for sure, therapy. You really didn't realise the amount of help that you offered.
It was two lads actually talking, and talking with nobody else around, so you didn't have to worry about what you were saying. I couldn't believe that he actually took my advice. I didn't realise how significant this conversation was to him.
I owe him my life, absolutely owe him my life.
Brendan was finally in a position to make some positive changes in his life. but it would mean giving up the career he loved.
Despite being a job that I wanted, and in fact it was my dream job, I have to admit that I need to go down a different route now because of what happened, and I don't regret it. It was the easiest decision to make, but it was the toughest decision I've had to make. I just basically built it up slowly, a day, an hour. That slowly kind of evolved into 3 or 4 days, and I remember getting an offer from my local athletics club to say, do you want to go back sprinting? And I took that up, so that was structure now. Gave me a goal. I went from passive, hopeless, nothing, to looking forward to doing something constructive. And that kind of sparked positive reinforcement in my life, and it started seeping into other areas. Getting back into the gym was the catalyst for my kind of rehab. It's got me healthy, it's got me happy.
Returning to the gym led Brendan back to a winter sport he'd dabbled with in his teens. Skeleton racing. This has been a game changer.
I have a 4-year plan set out with the end goal obviously is to perform for Ireland in the 2022 games in Beijing. When I was struggling and you said, hey Brendan, hold on man, you're going to be going for the Olympic Games in 2022, I would have laughed at you. I'm the man I am because I suffered through what I suffered. The very thing that nearly ended everything is the thing that's fueled me through the problems and the hardships that are ahead of me. I've picked an incredibly difficult sport to do, and I'm competitive. And the only reason I'm competitive is because of my mindset. And I'm only able to do that because of what happened to me before.
Really lean on your arm. Okay. I need that falling start. He finished in the top 25 in the world, and last year at the World Championships. He's got every chance. He's got every chance of not just going to the Olympics, really causing a major upset at the Olympics.
I'm going to be hungrier than everyone else there, and I've got an awful lot of ambition to do my country proud.
If he got to the Olympic Games, it would show just how far he's come. But even if he didn't make the Games, he's already won to still be here at all.
Like every force across the UK, Kent Police have experienced a surge of attacks on their officers. Last year, there were 1,234 attacks on Kent Police officers, the equivalent of nearly 24 per week. PC Jed Clark has been a serving officer for less than 2 years, but he already has first-hand experience of criminals attacking the police.
On a few occasions I have been involved in assaults against myself and colleagues, but unfortunately at the moment with the rate of crime and violent crime especially, it's a pattern that we are seeing more and more, unfortunately.
And one incident from March 2020 stands out in Jed's mind.
So this is the point where we've arrested him, got hands onto him. There's a panic button bush here. And it's when he's made off now with the knife in hand. It started like every early shift. You're kind of getting settled in for the shift. You've been given your crewings for the day, so who you're going to be working with. On this occasion, I was with Selena, my friend, and we were just nattering away in the briefing when we were given a really immediate call to exit the briefing early. And the call that we received was that there was a female and a male arguing on the street. It was just outside the town centre of Ashford, along one of the main roads. It is a very definition of a public place. There's all walks of life, there's commuters, there's children, there's people going early morning shopping, there's people going for walks. Our main priority straight away is public safety. At this stage, again, we don't know exactly what's gone on. At this point, we just know there's been an argument, so we need to keep everyone safe. We need to separate both parties of that argument, find out what's gone on.
Has he done anything?
So we arrived on scene to be greeted by a member of the public who stated that there was a male being arguing with a female. He pointed out the male to me. He's probably around about 30 metres ahead of me at this point. Instinctively, went to get his attention to call him over. We had to sort of jog after him a little bit because he wasn't stopping. We need to be careful on how he reacts to us.
Yeah, mate. Do you want to stop there for me? Stop there for me.
I started engaging with him, just talking to him, letting him know that at this moment we just needed to talk to him to work out what had happened, just to ensure primarily that everyone's safe and well.
I'm not saying you haven't done anything, mate.
Yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah. Just
You've been arguing with a female? Yeah, I've been arguing,
Yeah. OK, has it just been a verbal argument?
Yeah, I just argued with her.
OK, all right. What's your name, mate? What's your name? We just got to take a few details. You're not nicked or anything. We're just talking to you, mate.
He was very kind of up there straight away, but one part of the main job of policing is knowing how to talk to people. Once you can talk to someone, you can bring them down to a lower level without needing to resort to any force.
I'm a real man, that's why when I get hurt, don't hit you.
Yeah.
I tell the truth.
Yeah, exactly. You've told us that.
While me and my colleague were speaking to the offender at this stage, the victim came up behind us and alleged that he had her phone.
Right, do you want to go back to the
Can I have a chat with you?
We'll come have...
No, don't speak to her like that. Do not...
It became apparent that he wasn't treating her with much respect, was quite abusive towards her verbally. It was at that point that Selena took her away after we got the phone back for her, as your police instinct kicks in that maybe this isn't just a verbal argument you've been told about, and there's more to it.
Excuse me?
I remained with the male. He was a very kind of trying to come across masculine, the man kind of telling me, oh, I'm a real man, I can do what I want.
Are you men? You are a man? I'm a man.
Yep.
And I could straight away tell that that was his mindset, was he was the boss and it was his way or the highway, and that she had no power in this relationship. It was very clear that he was the controlling person there.
Where are you what's your plans now? I know, did you give my colleague your date of birth?
I was just talking to him, keeping him calm. But again, at this stage, nothing to indicate to me that there's a risk. Shortly after, my colleague came back and kind of gave me the nod, and as soon as she gave me the nod, I knew he was going to be arrested for something. At this stage, I didn't know what. He was arrested for stalking and harassment.
Like, at this moment in time, you're under arrest for stalking. You do not have to say anything that may harm. Get off.
He was just being a bit resistive to us, kind of not giving us his arms, kind of kicking off, saying, oh, what, no, this doesn't need to happen.
Stalking. You do not have to say anything that may harm.
We both closed on him, one on each shoulder, got hands onto him. Again, not expecting any resistance at this moment, maybe just a bit of a lock-up. But at that point, when he locked up, we put him to the wall, just so we had a bit more control over him and he wasn't a risk to the public.
Excuse me, you didn't even need to talk to her. No, don't touch
that knife.
No.
And it was at that point, I remember just hearing Selena shout, he's got a knife, he's got a knife. And it was at that point that he exploded upwards. His aggression went right up. And I thought that she'd been stabbed because I thought that he'd got the knife out of his pocket. But I remember her shouting, and at that point I thought, yeah, she'd been stabbed. And that was when the male turned to me with the knife. And I kind of thought, oh, I think I'm next. Everything just started to go in slow motion. You really realised the gravity of your situation. You really realised what could happen to my colleague and to myself.
Later, the offender makes a run for it, but Jed and his colleague are hot on his heels.
We need to deal with this. We can't let this male get away no matter what happens. We have got to apprehend him.
At this moment in time, you're under arrest.
In Kent, PC Jed Clark and his colleague have been called to a report of a disturbance on a busy street. As they attempt to apprehend the suspect, he resists arrest and produces a knife.
No, don't touch.
Get that knife.
No, don't touch.
We know he's got a knife, we know he's prepared to use it. This is 7:30 in the morning, we've got school kids, we've got a bus across the road that's just picked up school children. I went to try and kick him, just to try and hit him to the floor. And I remember kicking and he moved away and I followed around with a kick, and it was at this point that he made a run for it. We need to deal with this. We can't let this male get away no matter what happens. We have got to apprehend him.
Where's the knife?
I gave chase. I shouted to my colleague asking where the knife was. Did he still have it on him? Was it in his hand? Because I couldn't see it at this point. He cut across a car park. Once he reached the car park, I knew that he was going into a new build estate that had no out roads. So he was essentially running into a cul-de-sac, into a dead end. I remember walking around the corner, seeing the male turn towards me, and he looked at me, and he had the knife in his hand, and I think I was probably around about 20 metres, 15 metres away. And I remember looking at him and him holding this knife, and I thought he was just about to throw it at me, just to chuck it at me, to try and get me to back away, because it was so clear that he did not want to be caught. If he throws it, there's a chance it's going to hit here, there's a chance it could hit here, hit anywhere. So that was really heart-stopping.
Man has lost the knife.
He turned back round and he threw the knife onto the roof. I know that the knife's gone. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have another one. It doesn't mean he doesn't have something worse on him. So immediately I knew that this male needed to be put on the floor. We needed to control him.
Get down now! Get down now!
I needed backup. I needed my colleague there to help. And again, as soon as she came, we were able to get the male into handcuffs. And I remember him snapping him into those handcuffs was such a relief, because at that point I knew that he wasn't going anywhere.
No, stay there. Stay down on the floor. Get your other hand behind your back.
Well, see, you're trying to do
Right, shut up.
I'm not
Shut up.
See?
Right. Do you understand you're under arrest for stalking? Right. Possession of offensive weapon.
But don't hurt me.
Right, you didn't think about when you carried on.
Although both officers were badly shaken, neither of them sustained any injury.
Following the arrest, I remember the radio squawking. You heard the sirens coming, and it was a massive relief knowing that you had units close by that were going to be able to assist.
The offender was convicted of 2 counts of assaulting an emergency worker, a malicious communications offence, 1 charge of common assault, and another charge of possessing a bladed article. He was sentenced to 1 year and 8 months in prison.
Nice, it was...
With the offender safely detained, a search begins for the knife.
There, just there, mate. Get your gloves on. 7-2, knife located.
The knife itself was a steak knife. It was quite sharp, serrated. It was about 5 inches long. The scariest part of it was how concealable it was. And if it hadn't been for Selena's reactions, we could have been dealing with something so much worse, because if that knife had come out of his pocket, we would have been in a lot of trouble. There is a moment here when that I went to kick, but I missed. So we've now got the male making off. I think the first time that I properly watched it outside of the incident, it brought it all back that happened, and something so mundane and so simple had gone so wrong so quickly. It was at this point that I came around the corner and he's facing me with the knife. You hear these stories coming from other officers, but you don't expect it to happen to you at such an early point in your service.
Jed is determined to use this experience positively and to further his career in the police.
You're always chasing perfection in this job. There's always room for development. That's something that I've always taken on board and that I've always wanted to develop and become the best police officer possible. And this has been an experience where I've really felt that I can develop from it. Violent crime is becoming more apparent in every element of criminality, and it's something that is so sobering and that we are so aware of. And you don't want any of your colleagues to go home hurt or not go home. You want them to be able to go home to their family, their children, their parents, and be able to give them a hug and just say that everything's okay.